You know, Mortimer, it's an appalling fact, but last year in the United States alone, something like 35,000 to 40,000 separate titles were published. Now, what does a reader who wants to read well and truly and actively do with that enormous mass of reading matter?
And what does he do with the 8 million books on the shelves of the Harvard Library?
Yeah.
In fact, not only can he not read them all, he shouldn't read them all. Thomas Hobbes once said, "If I read as many books as most men do, I would be as dull-witted as they are."
Well, how many books can you read in a lifetime? I mean, read in the sense of read that we've been talking about here.
I would think in a lifetime considerably less than 500. Might even be as little as 200 or 300 books in a lifetime. Read well, read actively, read for the purpose of deepening one's understanding and lifting one's mind up to a higher level of insight and understanding.
Well, you've read more books than that, though, of course. You've read books at various levels of activity and intensity.
Well, as a matter of fact, I like to think of all the books in the world as forming a vast pyramid. Mm-hmm. At the baseline of that pyramid are the books that one doesn't have to read even once. One could scan them and put them aside. They are not, except perhaps for pleasure or to pass an idle hour, not worth reading once.
And what's the percentage? What percentage?
I would say
95%?
that's 95%.
Yeah.
Above the baseline is a second level of the pyramid, are the books that are good enough, and there are good books, but not great books, good books, good enough to read carefully just once. Mm-hmm. But if you went back to them, you'd find no reward in them at all. They wouldn't hold up. They would not lift your mind any further. They wouldn't reward you.
You would have gotten everything out of them the first time that they had to offer. Yeah.
At a level higher than that, a much smaller number of books, I would say now 2% of all the books that are written are worth reading more than once, 2 or 3 times perhaps. A second time, you would find other facets that you hadn't seen the first time.
And you would want to check your insights into the book the first time.
But perhaps not more than 2 or 3 times. And then, at the very apex of the pyramid, are the very small number of books, I would guess 100 or less, that would be worth, that are inexhaustible, in the sense that you could read them over and over and over again, any number of times in the course of one's life, always learning more.
Well, why is that? I mean, that's a strange thing to say, isn't it? That you can read a book over and over and over again without exhausting it. What is it what characteristic of the book allows that?
What I often have said about a great book is what makes that to be true, namely, that the book is over everybody's head all of the time. Yeah. So that it has enough power, so that no matter how often you come at it, there's more there to attract your mind and inform your mind. Mm-hmm. There are very few books like this. You know, there are many definitions of the great books. Mark Twain once said wittily, the great books are the books that everybody wants to have read, but no one wants to read. And your uncle, Charles Van Doren, once said in my presence, I thought very, very wisely, that the great books are the books that never have to be written again. They're so good, no one can try to do them again. But I do think that my definition goes along with your uncle's, that the great books are the inexhaustible books, the books that sustain a lifetime of reading.
And of course, when you go back to them, you have changed, you've grown up, you've matured. Precisely. Your mind has become more elevated, you hope, and if you are a good reader, that's likely to have happened. And even so, that book is still over your reach just a little bit. And it continues to be just out of your reach. You can reach the lower part of it, but it still will pull you up and forward in life.
But since human beings are different, I would guess that the great books, the books that will do this for you, may not be the books that will do it for me.
No, I'm sure
Perhaps for every individual, there's a small set of books that act in this magnetic way, in this powerful way of keeping the mind growing, alive and growing. And one way to test this out, I've done this with people over the years, always with amusing and instructive results, is to imagine the experiment of having to live on a desert island. Mm-hmm. This is a desert island beautifully outfitted. You're not Robinson Crusoe having to take care of yourself. The hotel arrangements are excellent. Food and shelter, all the conveniences of life. There are only 2 things that you're going to lack on this desert island. You don't have to work for a living. All your time is your own. You have no human beings to associate with. You lack company.
Oh, yeah,
and you will have no radio and TV. Mm-hmm. And you have 10, I'm going to put you on this desert island, put myself on this desert island for 10 years.
So during those 10 years, you have to occupy your mind by reading. It's the only...
You have to keep your body exercised. You have to keep, if you don't swim or run or climb trees, your body will become flaccid. You'll lose your muscle tone. You, in fact, probably won't be vigorous and well. Right. And similarly, if you don't use your mind in that time, your mind will go to pieces. So you have... Now, the only thing you're going to be allowed to take on the desert island with you is 10 books. And the question is, if you had to sustain your mind, the food is supplied. It's going to sustain your body. If you had to sustain your mind for 10 years, what 10 books or 10 authors, 10 sets of writings would you take with you?
Or which ones would you take?
Let me show you. Here are the great books of the Western world, and there are 74 authors here. And I can't take them all. In fact, I wouldn't want to take them all, because only a small number of these are the greatest of the great books. Let me tell you which ones I'd take. First of all, I'd take Thucydides, History of the Peloponnesian War.
Oh, you surprised me.
And I would take that because that history, that story of the conflict between Athens and Sparta holds the mirror up to all international relations, the whole world of politics, both in speech and action. I would then take, not all of Aristotle, but just 2 of Aristotle's works in this volume, his Ethics and his Politics, which deal with the perennial and absorbing problems of the good life and the good society.
I expected that one, Mortimer.
I would take also Plato, because the dialogues of Plato are, I think, difficult to understand, but always rewarding when one tries to understand them. They are a mixture of poetry and philosophy, and belong in my list of 10.
That surprises me a little bit. I didn't think Plato would be among your 10.
Next, I would take the author that Harry Truman read over and over and over again, and I read it over and over again, just like President Truman. Plutarch's Lives.
Yes, yes, I agree completely.
You agree to that?
I agree completely. That's...
read it over?
I'll tell you in advance, that's one of my 10 also.
Now, my next 2 you probably won't take, but I would take Augustine, the father of Christian theology, Christian belief, and I take it because of one work in this volume, that is his Confessions. Because the Confessions are the account of a man, an extraordinary man, powerful man, seeking his salvation and dealing with all the questions involved in the salvation of the human soul.
I think that if I had 11 or 12 or 13 to take, I would have included Augustine, but I didn't.
Along with Augustine, I take another great Christian theologian, and that is Aquinas, the Summa Theologica, but not the whole Summa Theologica. I want only the treatise on God and the treatise on man.
You can have the whole volume if you want to.
Now then, I have here the Essays of Montaigne. You chose Montaigne? I did indeed. Oh, I'm delighted, Mortimer. That's almost my favorite book. Because this is a commentary on every aspect of human life, on the frailties of human nature, on the foibles of man, and written with magnificent wit, magnificent
And you know, I
variety.
like Montaigne, too. I've thought in choosing my 10, which I'll show you in a moment, that I would have to live with these people for 10 years, and I'd like to live with Montaigne. Then I would take, of course, along with Montaigne, I would take the plays of Shakespeare. There I'll give nothing up. I want all the plays of Shakespeare. And the poems, And the poems. Right. That's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right. Now, my next 2 are an English philosopher, John Locke. You're taking Locke, huh? Both for his, not that I agree with him, but his thought fascinates me. And the more I look at it, the more questions arise. Not that I agree with his conclusions, but they put to me the questions I want to think about. Both his treatise on civil government and his essay on human understanding. And finally, my favorite great book, Tolstoy's War and Peace. There's my 10, and I really think that on this desert island, these 10 books could occupy me for the 10 years. I would be alive with them and growing. Well, I'm impressed. I wasn't surprised about Aristotle. I was surprised about Montaigne, and Montaigne would be one of the ones that I would choose. Shakespeare, too. Let me see where these are now. I wouldn't take Herodotus and Thucydides. I'd take Plutarch. Where's Montaigne? Now, there's your 4. That's 3. That's 3. That's 3. Let me put these aside then, Charles. All right. Now, you have 7 more to go. Right. I'm going to get them out here. And I may surprise you in a couple of these. I won't surprise you by saying that I want to take the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer.
I'm sure that.
Because I've read them over and over again, but I will never stop as long as I live reading these great poems, which are the beginning poems in the history of Western thought, and to me define all the tasks and solutions of poetry. I would take Dante. I would take the Divine Comedy. As a matter of fact, I want the complete works of Dante because I want to read the Divine Comedy in the context of all of his other works. I would take Don Quixote.
Oh, yeah. If I had, may I say, if I had 12 to take instead of 10,
all right,
I would take Don Quixote too.
And I decided against War and Peace.
Why?
And for Cervantes, because I decided I would rather spend 10 years with Sancho Panza and Don Quixote than I would with Prince Andrei and Natasha and so forth. But I just like these people better. Yeah. I love Tolstoy, but I adore Cervantes.
If I had 12, I would take Cervantes and I would take Rabelais, I think.
Well, Rabelais is pretty fine, too. Finally, and here you won't agree, I would take the works of Sigmund Freud.
I took 2 theologians. You took a psychologist.
Right. But I've only got 7. I've got 3 more to do. One of them is
3
the
not
Bible.
in the great books?
No, they're not in the great books. One is the Bible.
But you think they are great books?
I think they are.
Well,
one is the Bible.
The Bible is, in a sense, in the great book.
It is in the set. Another one is an anthology, the best anthology that I could possibly have of lyric poetry, because I would not want to spend 10 years without lyric poetry. I wanted the best and the biggest that there is.
That's a comment on me that I didn't put any lyric poetry in my set.
And finally, as I would take the collected poems of my father, Mark Van Doren, because for 10 years I would want to be reminded of myself and of him and of my mother and of my wife and of my brother. My whole family is talked about in these. I think, I'm not going to say whether I think it's a great book. For me, it is a great, memorable, and a book that I can't live without.
Well, you know, I think the books we agree about, and the books we almost agree about, are, I should say, the archetype, the model of what we mean by a great book. I mean, clearly, the poems of your father wouldn't work for me as they work for you.
No, but they would work for me as a great book does. I want to go back to them over and over and over again.
Yes.
And as I do that, I am always delighted. I always learn. I come to new insights about him and about myself. And what more can a great book do than that?
If we were on this desert island, each of us by himself, do you think at the end of 10 years, with our small set of books, we'd come out better men, better minds?
Oh, I'm sure we would. We would have survived. That's the first thing that was true. And in the second place, we would have come out better men. I believe so.
Well, then, you know, the experiment is one that everyone should perform.
Yeah.
Because, in fact, everyone is on a desert island.
Right.
Even though radio and TV and company is provided for everyone. Nevertheless, so far as the growth of one's mind is concerned, the desert island experiment is the real test.
Yeah.
What one does by oneself in the quiet of one's room with books in one's hand. And I think everyone should put himself to the test and ask himself what books he'd take, what books he'd surround himself with if he had to live with them for 10 years.
And then turn off the television and start to read them.
Correct.
I think that I'm very interested in the fact that there is an overlap of 3, Montaigne and Shakespeare.
Well, the Bible belongs, I think, with the great